minutes from October 25th. If anyone has comments on those, please get them to Brooke. We'll move right into the reports and recommendations. The first three are all related to Sandy Run. We'll do those three first, and then so that our guests can get on the road, we'll do a first community input immediately following those three. So first up, electric switchgear and transformer bid results. Brenda or Bob or Arif? Okay.
Good evening. Okay. So as you're aware, there's a couple of phases of this project that we're trying to implement to allow for the execution of the main project in an efficient manner. The first one we've talked about before is the switchgear. So we're pre-purchasing and installing the switchgear for a couple of reasons. It's to allow for the demolition of the annex building to occur, and to allow for electric service to continue to the main building as well as to the modular classrooms. A big portion of this scope of work, though, is going to be reutilized for the new building. So that switchgear is part of the new building construction in the end, although it does backfeed temporarily the main building and the modulars. So we got competitive bids, as was expected, and the project lowest bid is by A.N. Lynch Company. We have worked with them before, and so their bid amount is $415,000. That bid was about $250,000 below budget. So, are there any questions on that? I think that's pretty straightforward.
Can you, just to be clear, what are we doing with the two alternates?
We're not taking them. They were, again, for competitive reasons, and they're both add alternates, but we had different manufacturers, and we're going to be doing some of this on the main building, too, with different equipment, but they were both additional costs. Right now, we're comfortable with the base bid equipment.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee or the rest of the board? Oh, okay. Thanks.
So the next one is the modular classroom installation proposal. This one, we did not get as many proposals as we would have liked to. We had 8 of the biggest modular classroom vendors on our list. They attended the pre-bid conference, and we had a lot of interest at that point. And in the end, we only ended up with 3 proposals, and actually only 2 were can really be evaluated, because the third one actually withdrew his bid due to an error. And we really only ended up with 2 modular classroom vendors. The difficulty with the issue with these modular classroom vendors, as I understand it, is right now they have no inventory of modulars. We've tried every trick in the book. We even had the option for them to use refurbished units, which actually helped us. It's a $450,000 deduct of savings to go with the refurbished units versus brand new. Even the brand new units, because of the demand right now, they're charging more than they would, and there just isn't stuff out there. So that we unfortunately were caught in a situation where the modulars are more complicated and the inventory is not there. I will remind you, though, there are costs in this modular bid that are a function of some of the ADA compliance issues that we must execute. So it's unfair to put all of this cost completely on the modular. And then in addition to that, there are some phasing costs for site work and other work that is part of the main building construction that is also in this cost. Bottom line, though, is this cost was higher than we expected by approximately $700,000. As I indicated to you, there were some savings on the switchgear, but bottom line is we've tried everything. I spent actually the whole Thanksgiving week and weekend negotiating and driving this price down. We were successfully able to do that to a certain extent. but we are still at approximately $700,000 over where we would like to have been. Now, part of that might also have been a little underestimating on my part on what the cost of that would have been. So it's hard to put all those pieces together. But with that, what we've done as a team is decided to really relook at the project closer. And I think we can discuss that item whenever you're ready, Mark. But for now, I think I'll just stop at that. Does that sound good?
Yeah, Mr. Roos, do you have something to add?
Yes, thank you. Just to make sure the board and public is aware that there are going to be some constraints, board ability, what they can award with respect to the modulars. The modulars are a material element of the consent decree that was entered into in the ADA litigation that was concluded in September of 2018. There's some very precise requirements for modulars and for timelines for when those modular plants need to be developed and approved. So it's going to be a conversation that cannot be entirely held in public, but it's important that the board get as much information as it can from the engineer. I don't believe you're going to be in a position tonight to make a recommendation to the full board. I think it's going to be my recommendation that there be a follow-up discussion or an executive session with respect to what the modular bids are in relation to what the effect of the consent decree is with respect to that. So that's what I came here to say.
Okay, thank you. So with that understanding, are there comments or questions from the board about what we have in front of us?
The one thing I'll add, Mark, I forgot to mention is the layout of the refurbished unit is slightly different than what we were going to get with brand new units. However, we've spent a detailed amount of time with the administration, the school, and we feel that they will not compromise the educational and intended use of the program within the modulars. We're still getting the bathrooms, still getting almost the same amount of rooms. There's some layout changes just because it's a $450,000 savings to obviously use the refurbished. The sizes are slightly different. The layout was posted, I think, Brenda. The new layout is there. So you can see, I mean, actually somebody looking at it would have a hard time seeing the differences, but I did want to point out there are some nuances and differences in sizes and layout, but we've spent time with principal, assistant principal, the administration's looked at it, Bob and us, and we feel it, I think it also complies with the decree that was just mentioned, and otherwise we couldn't do it, of course.
There?
So did you say there's the same amount of classrooms or less classrooms with this?
The same count, but their rooms are, for example, a couple of them are actually bigger than what we had, and a couple of them are slightly smaller, by 10 to 20 square feet. So you might not notice it, but it's enough to just point it out.
Yeah, to be clear, the original plan had all 20 rooms, one of which is an administrative office, but they were all the same size. And in this plan, there are some that are considerably larger, a couple that are just a hair smaller. The doors, the exterior emergency exit door is in a different place. There's some additional storage. The overall footprint is very slightly longer and very slightly narrower, but very close to the original.
Yeah, he had something, and we basically worked, as I said, through Thanksgiving weekend trying to reconfigure this to maintain that saving that was being offered, and willing to do that.
That a lot of the work that Arif and his team have done laid some of our more serious initial concerns about consent decree. So I want to acknowledge.
Yeah, it was just too much to pass up. We had to take the savings. We had to do what we could.
So I feel constrained in asking some of the questions
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, and so I will do that in our executive session. But did you mention that you believe that you may have underestimated in some areas? What areas do you think you underestimated in?
Well, I think the one that's very difficult to come up with is certainly what the marketplace is doing in the modular area. It's a very specialized and limited scope, and we're asking for 20 units. It's a big number, but um, I think the other issue that I probably underestimated is the complexity and timelines of what we're able to provide. Um, Even the connection hallway between the modulars and the existing building, it's basically like like an existing building is going to be tied in there. And when I initially budgeted this over a year ago, I had no expectations of the complexity of that. So as I said, some of that is underestimating, but it's also changes in what we've decided and needed to do. So I am taking responsibility for some of it, but the variables kept changing. That area by itself is almost $200,000. That connection. There was no way, like when I was thinking of modulars, I was thinking of a ramp going up to a set of modulars. But that's one thing. Connections for the bathrooms. I mean, we got quite a lot of bathrooms in these modular classrooms. That's another piece. And then, as I said, the site work we're doing to effectuate the location, again for various other reasons, was more than expected, but it's also what we need in order to continue to construct the building and allow the buses in operation to carry on. And then the last piece is just we cannot even let them get in there until 6:15, and then we have to finish all of this by, I think it's 8:20. So it is a heavy-duty amount of work that we have to do. And you guys have seen the phasing plan. I think it's really going to help us execute the new building and give the contractors an efficient area to build. But to execute it, we only have that window. And I think those are the areas that I probably neglected to look at over a year ago.
Refurbished versus new. I just want to assure the community that although it's refurbished, we do have a warranty that covers the use of those modulars. If anything does break during the time that they're there, it's covered. And anything else to add with that?
Well, yes. So each unit has HVAC, air conditioning, and heating. The contractor is responsible for that. So that's probably the biggest issue that you might worry about with the refurbished. And I'm being told they're fully functional. Again, we'll have a lease cost. We're going to inspect them. But again, we have to remember we're using them for 3 years. I think they're going to be better than or as good as the rooms that we're relocating from. In terms of condition, they'll have air conditioning. They'll have lights. The light levels will be fine. I can tell you the carpet's not going to be brand new, or the walls won't be brand new. They're telling me the ceilings are fine. It's going to be fully sprinklered. It meets code. We're running all the same data wiring that we would.
Technology would be the same.
That's all going to be the same.
Right.
So yeah, they're not going to look brand new, but the outside, I've seen pictures of the outside. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be something that anybody's going to worry about. They're not like banged up or different colors. They're all beige. So
So the condition is generally good. These are just not brand new.
yeah, we can actually, if everybody's really concerned, they're coming from West Virginia or somewhere, but they have the same ones they moved to Lower Merion a year ago. Oh, you're familiar with them? So maybe you can tell us if they look okay, because I didn't drive by yet.
Yeah, if it's the ones that I'm thinking of, and I was in those a couple weeks ago, the modulars were absolutely fine. I think the only concern we had being in there was that the whiteboards weren't as nice. They might have been in another setting, but they still worked very well. And the sound and temperature and everything was really good.
Okay.
Um,
It's a
and,
good point, though.
so obviously this can impact the budget overall to the project because this is obviously a significant difference. Are you concerned about other underestimates for the rest of the Sandy Run project?
So the biggest variable we have right now, which we're in the process of developing, is the site cost. We just got the preliminary plans were submitted to the township for review. They've just been sent to the conservation district. So we're in the process of putting that budget together as well as the off-site road improvements. And the other variable we're looking at very closely right now, since you're asking, is we're looking at the export of soil from the site. We're doing some additional testing to see how it meets the DEP requirement. I don't think overall with the building, we've really managed that really, really well. And in fact, I think we're going to talk to you in a minute about, we agreed with your concerns. And if you saw my memo, I was reinforcing that I think we need to continue to look at that. And we have done that over the last week. And we've made some decisions, I think, that I think hopefully you'll endorse and agree that I think they at least initially completely offset this concern. Okay. But so we have been working. We are nervous about it because of things are out there. Everybody's busy. But I think we're setting this project up to be one that everybody's going to want to go after. And that's what we have to do. And we're trying to keep it open. You know, Bob has been very good about the systems not being proprietary. That's kind of areas we're going to, I think, benefit from. And we're looking at we still have a number of alternates to further give the board options. But I think Mark is going to introduce in a minute some of the things we've done already to try to offset your concerns and ours.
To be clear for Sarah's question, the nature of the underestimate here not likely to manifest elsewhere in the project.
Not at this percentage. I think if the whole 72 million came in $700,000 over budget, considering the economy, I think we'd be okay. I don't think you want to do it on a percentage basis. So.
Anyone else have comments?
And I also want to add, we are not factoring in. We're keeping that in abeyance. And Brenda, Steve, and the team that we're working with, we have a $3.2 million contingency that we're keeping in abeyance. So we're not touching that at this point. I mean, we could easily just sit here and say, let's just take it out of that, but the team has taken a completely different tactic on that. Okay.
The reason, I just want to expound upon that, the reason that I'm really against touching the contingency at this point, the contingency to me is a really sacred pot of money, and I think that we have to be really wise in how we use that as we go through the project, because there are factors out there that we don't know. The economy could change, regulations change, so we want to make sure that we preserve the money that's in the contingency for during the period of actual construction.
Hopefully with the next thing that Mark will talk about, it'll help frame that out a little bit.
Okay, so anything else on this item? So ordinarily we would say this is something we want to move on to the full board, but Ken, your recommendation is to not do that in this case, right?
Yes, I think it's premature to do that fully. I think it's premature to do that until you've fully discussed it in the context of the consent decree.
Okay, and we'll do that at a future executive session. Okay, and I did skip the first item on the agenda, which was the switchgear. We'll move that forward to the full board. So the third item, budget and cost saving options for Sandy Run. We did meet immediately before this meeting. The internal team met and discussed a number of these items as additional ways to reduce the cost of the project. And I want to call attention to a few of the things that we decided there. There are three visible changes that we are recommending that I want to call attention to. One is simplifying the courtyard down to It will continue to have ramps on either side, but the bulk of the courtyard is a large grassy slope, still ADA accessible throughout, but it loses the stepped design that provides for exterior classroom space. We don't have a dollar amount on that one yet. We're still developing that. But Arif has a ballpark estimate for it. What was that estimate?
I'd say it was close to 150,000.
Okay. The second visible change is to the exterior dining area adjacent to the cafeteria. The trellis, the large concrete patio, and some of the fascia of the building there. Looking at possibly making that an alternate or eliminating it. We're going to come back, or the architects will come back with whether they can make that into an alternate. But that one has a dollar amount of
138,000,
and then the third one is reducing the square footage of the building by reconfiguring some of the classroom wing. The biggest change involved in that involves the teacher planning areas adjacent to the knuckles would be the most significant. And there's a bunch of other reconfiguration and movement of things, but that teacher planning would happen in classrooms as it does today instead of dedicated space. There are a number of smaller
that was
items.
about 600, a little over $600,000.
Yeah. Roughly 2,500 square feet worth of space all total. Sure, let me just cover the smaller things first. There are some other, reducing the depth of curtain wall framing. That's basically the depth of the window framing pieces from 7.5 to 6 inches. And reduction of roof insulation thickness at the roof drains of about $147,000. There are a number of other items listed on the sheet that you'll see. We are not considering any of those other items at this time. Sarah.
So for the teacher planning spaces, is the recommendation to keep the knuckles but to remove the teacher planning separate areas?
If it's okay, I'll address that question. So one of the things when we were looking at the square footage of the building, we know that cost savings come in square footage. We don't want to make changes to the building that would hurt the student experience. Right now, the current building does not have quote unquote planning centers for teachers. And because we're in a team concept, and we will be in a team concept for the foreseeable future, having those planning centers or planning rooms are what I would consider nice to have things, but not really needs. And if we look in the building and we say we're committed to reducing the size of the building square footage wise and keeping the needs, I think that's something that we can do without. Right now, the knuckle spaces of the building, the collaboration spaces, are the same square footage, and we'll continue to have conversation about that, specifically to make sure that those spaces are used appropriately, because it's prime real estate in the building.
We don't have a design yet from the architects on exactly what this will look like, but it is possible that the closet space where furniture can be stored from the knuckles would move and eat into a little bit of the square footage for the knuckles, but that's not a significant.
Okay, so regarding the roof insulation, I guess why is it recommended initially to go with 5 inches, and what are the potential issues by reducing it to 3.5?
So this is more of an interpretation issue. The codes kind of are implying now that you should have 5 inches, and it's really actually based on an R value of 30. So you can look at an R value of 30 and average it. And if you average it, if we do, because we have slope, we start at 3.5, we end up at 8, and we average it, we're getting our R30 versus what we were initially doing was starting at 5 and then going to 11 as an example. So we would really have an average R value of like 36 something. So we're meeting the code at an R value of 30. And insulation, as we look at it closer, starts to have diminishing returns once you get, so you put insulation and, you save, but then you get to a certain point and you put insulation and your savings, it just sort of flattens out. So we feel like, having looked at this closer, we feel that we're not compromising the energy efficiency savings of the building, and it's going to offset a number of different things, because what happens is the parapets, everything gets bigger and higher. The roof curbs get higher. So that's why we believe this is a savings, more of a value engineering savings, and not really cutting a cost per se, like the square footage.
So would you have recommended that regardless?
We did. Originally, we had talked about this, and it was one that we kind of were teetering on, and we went back and looked at everything back again closer. We even went back, for example, on the list you saw, we went back and revisited the brick size, evaluated durability concerns and everything, and decided, our initial analysis of that was accurate and should not accept that deduct and go with larger brick for the reasons that durability, potential crack. This was one we said we would take. Another one you might have seen on the list was using a drive-it type product instead of metal panels on the higher part. Again, from a durability and aesthetic standpoint, we decided not to. This is one where I feel right now, and the team feels, that we can accept without compromising the building. The net of all of this is close to $1 million. It's a little over $1 million is the net savings. So the goal of the team was to get to what your question was, which is, where do we offset this right off the bat? So I think we've accomplished that and a little bit more.
So I think this is part of a process that is part of every project. Even if we didn't have the issue of the modulars coming in over budget, this would be something we would go back and we would look at. One of the things, just to reiterate the point that Arif spoke to, we've been very clear that we don't want any of the items on the value engineering list to detract from, number one, the student experience. So we don't want to fundamentally change the student experience, and we don't want to we don't want to be foolish in decisions where we use inferior product to build the building. There may be some things, even during construction, that the construction team will bring to us for some consideration, and that's where, at least I know I'll be relying not only on construction management, but on Mr. Lester to provide his professional opinion upon if he thinks those ideas make sense for, not only for the building in the short term, but this building has to last decades. And so we want to be very thoughtful and very methodical as we go through the value engineering process.
Anyone else have comments or questions on these items? Rob?
Sure. Just in regards to insulation and the exterior curtain wall framing, as it relates to energy efficiency, would those have any impacts in regards to that, and also the possible ACE grant?
That's a great question. So it's a great question. As you might have heard, the ACE grant, due to the snowstorm we had, the meeting was canceled and it's rescheduled for December 19th. I believe. So we won't know until December 19th. But we did look at both of these things before we recommended them. The window framing, that's the non-issue for this. But the insulation could have an impact. But again, we're going to offset any energy with solar. And that's what we're going to use the majority of the grant for, if you remember when we discussed that. So I think the offset on that is so insignificant. We felt we should look at the $150,000. I mean, $150,000 to try to make it up on energy savings is very, very hard to do. I mean, in a building like this that's going to be very energy efficient, like this whole building, we're going to be striving for, just to put it in perspective, $1 a square foot. So this whole building is going to use maybe $200,000 of energy a year. So how can I ever try to get 159,000 out of it? You know what I'm saying? You'll never get it. It'll take 50 years, 60 years to get it if we're able to do it. So that's the payback. By then you're replacing the roof. You know what I mean? So we did look at it. Good question.
Anyone else? Amy? Teacher?
Right. I do want to go back to the planning spaces. I thought the idea was that having the planning spaces would allow us to have classroom space if we need it. I mean, having the idea of having planning space would allow us to have classrooms that would be used continuously. If the planning spaces are going to be in the classrooms, that option is no longer available.
So working with the middle school administration, Rob Albert in particular, looking at the schedule and how the schedule will run not only this year, but for the foreseeable future, there will only be 4 instances throughout the day where that would occur. So we still will have where we can have teachers engage in team planning. We'll still be able to have, if a unified art needs to meet in a regular education classroom, we'll still be able to have flexibility to do that.
Anyone else? Okay, go.
So at this point, the other things that were on this list, you looked at and decided they were not good options. Things like reducing the number of classrooms or anything about the auxiliary gym.
The
Yeah.
alternate, the list on the alternates will remain. The alternate list below that we are keeping. So there are further, as I said, cost decisions that you'll be able to make on bid day. Like the auxiliary gym is still a big number that could either be something that we have to consider, or we may not, or it might be somewhere in between it. But there's almost a $2 million alternate there that, could be a decision point. But you don't need to decide that today. The squeezing of the building a little bit has to happen now. It's not one that can come back to later. So we focused on the ones that we have to do. The insulation thickness, you can't do that as an alternate because, like I said, it affects all of the other stuff around it, the edges. But to answer your question, the others above the alternate list, we discounted, other than the ones we talked about.
Arif, does the 2,500 square foot change mean that we need to do anything with PlanCon documents or Act 34?
No, because as was pointed out by Dr. Yanni, we're keeping our classroom counts the same. There is no change in that. It's more of just a readjustment of the planning spaces a little bit. So based on that, we're good. And in fact, actually, of course, we're not currently eligible for PlanCon either. But from an Act 34 standpoint, we've looked at that, and we're still in compliance with Act 34.
I would just take this opportunity to say, if you remember, I believe it was our August operations meeting. It was one of the first presentations I did as your superintendent. We talked about how we shrunk the building by X number of square feet. And one of the charges was to continue to look at how we could continue to reduce the size of the building without changing the student experience. And as far as the value engineering things that we're talking about, it's still a small percentage when compared to the overall construction of the building. And again, I'll just continue to stress, we won't bring anything to the committee for the committee's consideration to send it to legislative unless we feel like it's the appropriate thing for the building. And again, keeping in mind, we don't want to change the student experience.
This is actually more of a curiosity question. So all the value engineering items, the one that we didn't have a rationale explained was the exterior metal wall panel. You just explained the rationale as to why we didn't take that?
Versus Drive It?
Yeah.
So that was what I mentioned with the stucco type Drive It product.
My apologies.
It says EIFS, exterior insulation finish system. So you've probably seen some commercial buildings where it looks like stucco. So it's basically an insulation board with this coating system that goes on, and over time, the staining of it, it's not as durable. So we did look at that.
And the spaces that we're talking about, there are, for instance, around the upper part of the auditorium, on the, above the roof line, but where the auditorium sticks up, around that. Those are the kinds of places we're talking about for that. So it's not, at ground level or highly visible. Okay, so so are we recommending we move that? And not that there's a board action to take here, but we'll move it to discuss it again at legislative, or are we done with this item? Dr. Gianni?
I would believe at this point in time that we are finished with it. We can
Okay.
certainly bring it up as part of it, the discussion related to the previous item.
I think just an
Right.
acknowledgement that that's what we're doing,
Yeah.
It's just a decision that we made for the building. I don't think you're changing anything significant that needs to be a resolution, but
Right.
I think just acknowledging that there's a consensus to proceed on that basis because we are proceeding on the
Yeah,
timelines.
and we
right?
certainly need to give the architects that. Go ahead.
I think the main point or the final point that I'd like to make is our goal is to bring this project in the most economical way, but with the highest quality educational environments, physical and structural environments that we can for the long haul.
Okay, so as I said at the beginning of the meeting, so that Arif can get on the road, we'll do a first community input on these three topics related to Sandy Run only for now.
Well, great, because I have a Sandy Run concert I have to run to. So I know you're all thrilled that I get to speak. So thanks for the extra community input, Ginny Vitella, Ambler. I just want to say, okay, where do I want to start? I started texting because I was afraid I wasn't going to be here. When we were learning about this project, the $70 million number was like the pipe dream number. We had so much wiggle room. That's why it was sold at $70 million. It wasn't supposed to come close to that. And so here we are, the very first bid. The big thing, these modular things. We knew about it. We've known what the building looks like. We know what the terrain is. I even remember bringing up the fact that connecting to the music hallway, how that seemed so awkward because the buses and the chaos in the morning, I don't even know how that was even going to work. And that hallway so thin going by the music rooms where that connection was going to be. And again, the very first bid, and we're already $750,000 over budget, and we're talking about cutting things. This is the problem with $70 million and has been for the entire time. Because it's one thing if we said, okay, really the project's about 40,000 and we've already built in 30,000, I'm saying thousands, millions, and we've built in $30 million for this wiggle room, for these add-ons. And we also, I want to refresh everybody's memory, so we were not supposed to lose anything we already have. And to continue to see that auxiliary gym on the chopping block, a $2 million thing, yeah, that would be so easy to cut. But the reality is we use it, and we weren't supposed to lose it at all. The township uses it, the school uses it, and that would be a real shame to cut that at any point. I guess my other point, I have a question, really. The band, I was thinking about this because I'm thinking about where everyone's going to be. I don't know where the buses are going to go and where the cars are going to go, because I will tell you that at drop-off in the morning and at pickup in the afternoon with the buses and everything at Sandy Run is a nightmare without modulars sitting there. So I'm not sure how much thought has gone into that. I would be curious about what thought has, if any, has gone into there, because it is a nightmare now with the parking lot and the space we have. Also, I have concerns about, let's say, the band room. Now, we already know that we don't have a lot of room for band, right? So we have these 3 music rooms in that music hallway. One's chorus, one's orchestra, one's band. Then there's Mr. Kennedy has his whole band room in the annex. I know it used to be the old cafeteria, but it's actually a pretty big room that he uses for classes and for band. And I'm curious, we've got a lot of kids participating. I'm about to go watch them. I'm wondering in this 3-year transition where these kids are going to go. I also want to say for the ADA compliant, we were sold that, these modulars are going to be fantastic because they're ADA compliant and everything else. And I know we've got a situation that you have to comply with that I don't know all the ins and outs of, but I know that we didn't just learn about this last year. And it's really upsetting that we're here talking about an upprice, or we're not getting quite what we needed because of all this compliance, because that was these are all selling points of why this was such a needed, must-do project. And I think that's all. I can't think of my other questions. Thank you.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I just had a couple questions about the modulars. So refurbished is fine, like that's great, but the carpets are original. I'm wondering how old they are. Like if the carpets are original, do we do some sort of air quality test for mold or anything like that? Because, you know, they're only as good as the people who have used it before you, and if there wasn't good temperature regulation, that could be an issue. So I'm just curious what we do about that. And I'm just curious as to how many windows per room are there in these modulars? I guess that's it. Thank you.
I guess the got to restart time.
Please give us your name and.
Bob Haggerty, Fort Washington. Are you only taking input on the middle school, or
Yeah, just
is
Sandy
this-
Run topics for now. There'll be
Okay.
another community input at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll close community input and try to answer questions. Yeah, Steve, you want to take what you can? Arif? Go ahead.
And I was so good at the microphone until just now. Going on it. All right. So, Arif, let's start with the last question because that's freshest in my mind. Windows in the modular classrooms, 2 or 4?
Right, so each one, the layout's there, but each one definitely looks like it's got 2. Some of the classrooms look like they may have 3.
Great, okay.
Yeah, like I said, they're a little bit different sizes, each of them. So 2 or 3.
There was a question about traffic flow pattern for buses and cars. We can, I believe we have that completely hashed out at this point. And has that been posted on the Sandy Run website?
The phasing.
The phasing regarding transportation and the transportation study, I don't know that it has been, but we can certainly
Okay.
make sure that we get that posted.
But the phasing plan layouts, I think, is what, I think those were posted, were they? The color.
I would have to check.
Okay.
I think
So-
they were attached to some meeting minutes, but we'll
They,
verify that.
they can be posted. But to answer your question, it's been looked at very thoroughly. It is tight. There is no doubt about it. That whole site is tight, and we're trying to build another building next to it. We've known that it's tight. It's going to work. It's been looked at by everybody. It's going to have to be monitored and managed. It is tight, but it's functional.
And I think that the questions that we're getting tonight, I think, Ms. Evans, if you and I can work tomorrow or Monday at the latest, if we can start an FAQ document that can be put up on the website, I think that would be great. And then that way we have the answers are put out in writing, it's put out to the community, and then we can just add to the questions because I'm sure there will be questions that people may have that aren't here tonight. Windows, traffic pattern, where the band is going to practice in the transition. Did I miss anything?
The answer to that one, by the way, I'm going from memory, so I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the answer was the stage. But it was discussed.
But we'll make sure we have that.
Yeah.
We have that nailed down, and then also the age of the modulars and how we'll make sure. I'm assuming that through the inspection process, Arif, we will be able to have all of that inspected to make sure that they're free of mold, that they're free of any harmful agents.
So that's actually a good comment. I think it's a good idea. We can do a air quality test in each of them. I think from a lease standpoint, because it is HVAC units that they're responsible for.
Sure.
I think that's actually a good idea. We just do an air quality test pre-occupancy, and then if there is an issue, we'll know where we stood.
I think that would make me feel better, and I'm sure that will make just in general.
Yep, that's a good idea.
Especially because they're refurbished.
Yep. I think the only other one was not sure that there were any other questions we missed. Okay.
We'll make sure that, at least in the short term, that the FAQ document is not just on the Sandy Run page, but we'll make it one of the headlines on the website so that it's easy to find. And I think I just figured out the script for my Monday morning message. Monday.
All right, thank you. So, finishing up, so that finishes up the Sandy Run topics. Thank you, Arif and Ken. We'll move on the tower space lease agreement.
Yes, currently all the portable radios that we use in the schools, between the administrators, the lunch aides, teachers, those radios are all device to device. They have a very poor range. They can't talk building to building. We've been working with our radio company over the past few years, and we've identified that we can put a repeater system in that would operate off an existing antenna on the township's tower. The township has agreed that we can use that antenna, and through some testing that we did, we were able to use our portable radios across district. I was able to talk from Thomas Fitzwater to the custodians at Fort Washington Elementary on the portable radios. So if there's any time of emergency or just planning purposes or just help between schools, they'd be able to switch that channel and talk across school district. So the township is willing to let us use that tower. They just want us to sign an agreement. Right now, the agreement is being reviewed by the solicitor. So we should have that back for the legislative meeting.
And I see it's the agreement is $10 a year for how many years? Trying to find it, but I.
License.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so $10 a year is going to be really cheap after a
Yes.
while. All right, that's a great deal for us. Okay, and can you elaborate on what this will facilitate in practice? What will the impact be of being able to talk radio to radio across the district?
Talking radio to radio across district would allow, if during times of drills, training, we can coordinate. If we were doing an evacuation of a school, we'd be able to coordinate those evacuations between the two schools where we're transporting the students. By the radio, on the radio, everybody involved would be able to hear it. If you're using cell phones to communicate between schools, only the two people talking will hear, so now everybody involved will be able to hear it. We could also use it just for general maintenance practices. Maintenance can easily carry a radio, and if one mechanic needs help, it easily talk across district to the other mechanics.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
We also have a few dead spots in the high school where we have difficulty talking from one end of the high school to the other, and this would eliminate that as well.
Excellent. Has that been tested?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
You may remember, too, that we've worked on the dead spots in the high school before, after construction, so this will continue to improve communication.
In the meantime, I would just say, if in case anyone might be wondering, we're also using the Remind system. So if there is an emergency during the day, administrators are able to connect with one another through the Remind app on our phones, and there are no dead spots. But this actually, removing the dead spots and the communication that Mr. Lester spoke about is much, much better.
Okay, so we'll move this forward. Okay. Next up, radon testing proposal.
Yes, as we discussed before, we've been working with Element Environmental Solutions. They have past several years been our environmental consultant for indoor air quality, asbestos testing, remediation. They've been our go-to company. I went to them when we discussed radon testing. They do not do the testing themselves, but they do manage. So they have partnered, or actually subbed out the actual testing work to ABE Radiation Labs out of Lenhartsville. So they're proposing to test, they have the list of classrooms. They're proposing to test all classrooms in all the schools, with the exception of the annex, since that'll be coming there. So even if we did find something, we wouldn't have time to do any remediation anyway. So we're testing all the schools. Any classroom that is on the ground floor or any classroom that is above a crawl space will be tested. Their fee for the testing, $14,835. That's using all DEP recommendations on radon testing. So they'll provide us with a report, any recommendations that need to be made, any follow-up testing that needs to be done. Right now, we do not have a schedule. Once we sign this proposal to them, we'll start working on a schedule. Right now, I'm looking at, more towards the middle of the winter. Right now, with as wet as the ground is, as saturated it is, I don't think we would want to be doing testing anyway, because you're going to get some false results.
Comments or questions? Okay, sounds good. We'll move that ahead to the legislative meeting. And window replacement at Fort Washington.
Yes, we've been working with Michael Johnson, the architect, for the windows. Right now, his recommendation is that we split this project into a 2-year project. He's finding far greater work than we should attempt to take on in one summer. His recommendation is we take the two-story classroom section of the building. That would be the project for this summer, and the following summer 2020, we would do the remaining portions of the building. As part of his recommendations, we've been going through, he's done a lot of work very quickly. He has a lot of experience with window replacements in other districts. He is also recommending any doors, classroom doors, that go to the outside. Currently, we have 18 classrooms out of all of our classrooms that have a door that goes directly to the playground. 1 for security and 2 for energy efficiency. He is recommending that we do not put doors back in, that we actually put panels in, whether it be a window panel or a blank panel, which would be leading to really the last discussion we're having with him, is how many windows do we really need per classroom? He says the glazing that we have in our classrooms currently far exceeds really what we need for natural light. We can go ahead and replace window per window, square foot per square foot of glazing that we have in the classrooms, or we can reduce it. Either bring the window level down a little bit, or currently there's 8 windows in each classroom. Do you go 6 windows? Do you do 4 windows? These are some options that we need to take a look at. But each window that you remove and replace with a panel, it would all be architecturally designed, so it would look presentable. It's not that you're just taking out a window and putting a blank panel in. You would have a new wall system on the outside to cover those windows. But reducing the number of windows would greatly improve the efficiency of the building. So any future systems that we're doing will greatly be enhanced by removing some of the glazing that we have.
Sarah?
Bob, I know you haven't been here for. I know you weren't here when we did the other windows in the other buildings.
Somebody else's mic on.
All right. Nice. Okay. So I know you weren't here when we did the other windows in the other buildings. But do you know when we did those windows, or are we aware whether the windows were replaced 1 for 1, or we actually reduced some of the windows in the other buildings, or if any of the windows were in those other buildings more than what we needed, like in the case in Fort Washington? You know that?
Bob's looking like he doesn't really know.
I wasn't here for
my
that.
recollection, and is just my recollection, is that, well, first of all, those were not window wall systems. Those were individual windows, and we did replace them 1 for 1.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, I guess, how many windows necessarily we have in some of the other elementary schools versus what we currently have in Fort Washington, and if it'd be equitable, if we don't replace them with all the windows, or you know, and besides the efficiency savings, if it's less expensive to replace some of these windows with non-window panels.
It is less expensive to replace windows with a non-window panel. That is a cheaper option, or a less expensive option, I should say. But it's also an option that improves your building efficiency, your envelope efficiency of the building, because you get more insulation in the panels than you would glass. It's something to look at. Right now, we're open to all the options. You know, we could look at maybe if the teachers are looking at this, maybe instead of the center windows being windows still, you know, that would be a good place for another board or more poster space, another board space, and just have windows to the outside like you see in some other schools, where we can board panel over something, maybe just one or two sets of windows to the far ends of the building and just keep the center clear and wide open. Or we can just choose to keep all the windows and maybe bring the glazing down from the top, just reduce the height, because right now the windows at Fort Washington go from countertop of the cubicles to the ceiling. I don't believe we have that in the other schools. I don't believe they go as high as the top of the soffits.
I would just say when you're looking at what to choose there, consider the percentage of wall area as an equity factor in making that decision. Anyone else have comments or questions?
As you're talking about these windows and the panels potentially, are you also taking into account the potential for air conditioning, and to what extent will that impact the amount of windows or glass?
Yes,
and lights?
we are taking into account the existing heating unit ventilators that need an exterior grill on the panel, which could be replaced at a later time with another panel that has a blank in it. So if we upgrade later, remove the unit ventilators, that we can just blank off that panel. But we are taking into consideration the window units that we're planning on installing also. He is working with us to leave us one window open so we can place a window unit in each classroom.
So if we're talking about glass and light coming in your calculations, you would account for that. And so with taking out a door and replacing that by a panel, we're not losing a ton of light. That's what
Correct. And most of our classrooms, we're finding that we're pulling the shades down over the windows anyway, especially the rooms that get a lot of sunlight. They tend to pull the shades down, help keep some of the heat out of the rooms. That and some of the kids that get distracted. So it is what we are taking all that into consideration. But with the doors, right now, the gaps that we have on our doors at Fort Washington, you can see daylight through most of the doors. They're not very secure. Most schools have eliminated those that did have them.
Can we just be clear for Art? We're recommending that the 18 exterior doors, there will no longer be those 18 exterior doors.
Correct. The 18 exterior doors will no longer be exterior doors. There'll be panels, whether or not we put a window in its place or we put a blank panel as part of the exterior of the building in its place is yet to be determined.
One of the things when vulnerability assessments that are done by the state police, there is some disagreement among districts. It's been a conversation at the superintendent meetings when we're talking about Act 44 and what we're doing about security, if we should or should not have exterior or a way to go outside from classrooms. So I'm happy to share that information with the board. And then I think as we're talking about, you know, eliminating windows or not, I want to be clear that we're not talking about in any classroom eliminating all of the windows. And all the options really are on the table, just shrinking maybe the height of the window in some of the areas. Because as Mr. Lester said, there are, in many of the classrooms at Fort Washington, the windows are all the way to the ceiling.
And I think to be clear, the question before the board or this committee right now is, are we comfortable with doing this over 2 years, as opposed to the specifics of where the glass is? So anyone have any comments or thoughts on the 2-year plan? So I think we're good with that. And, oh, go ahead, Art.
I just want to make sure we are coordinating with the air conditioning units with this individual.
Yes, he is actually, Michael was brought to us by the engineer who's working on the air conditioners. They've worked with him on several other projects, recently at Downingtown, and they did recognize, they brought him forward to us, knowing that he does specialize in windows. They have a working relationship. If you notice, a lot of the drawings that he has already submitted to us are stamped by DJ Vervarelli, that they had done the drawings.
So then it sounds like we need to go over 2 years because it's just you can't do it over 1 year. But they would then coordinate the units. Would all the air conditioning units still go in the first year, or would we?
Yes,
delay?
all the air conditioning units would still go in the first year. Just some would go in the older windows, some will go in the newer windows.
Correct. Okay.
Other comments or questions? Okay, we will open it up for community input now on any topic.
Bob Haggerty, Fort Washington. Question came up before. I just want to bring it up again. Water fountains. Asked for a list of fountains with the filters. I know I have 3 boys, each in different elementary, middle school, and the high school. And my one in high school was like, I don't even know where it is. So if have a list that publish, like, these are the fountains that have filters, and is there an estimated time that, are they all going to get done, or are just going to live with the ones that do have filters? So that list could be provided, locations and number of fountains at
Sure.
each of the schools.
Yeah, we're happy to provide that. One of the things that we had talked about previously was making sure that we put all the water fountains on a cycle for replacement, so that they're continually updated.
The other thing I know, I guess about a meeting ago, 2 meetings ago, we had a bigger audience here, plus so wanted to know what's the status on that. There's studies still being done. I noticed on Highland and Fort Washington Avenue that there's markings on the ground where the crossing guard stands. Looks like there's a plan to widen that. So I want to know where we stand with that bus depot. I see plans of widening the roads happening, so I don't think we're okay with bus depot right now. So I just want to make sure that it gets stated and documented.
So I can tell you unequivocally, we have not made any decisions on the bus depot. We have gotten a list of properties. We will be discussing that at the December operations meeting. As far as markings on the road, I can tell you they have nothing to do with Field of Dreams, bus depot, etc.
Okay. It seems ironic. It's like
It does, and I've been,
timing is impeccable.
right, and I've been, every time there's a transportation oddity, I get emails from 5 or 10 members of the community saying, what are you building the bus depot now? There will be, before we make any final decisions on wherever the bus depot winds up going, there will be a plethora of information. No one will be able to escape knowing the plans before there's actually a board vote.
I know it kind of came over the summer and just finding out in the fall that this is happening, and here we are in November. Like, seeing things are happening, steps are being put in place. Pumping station where you're going to put more tanks. I know it was said the last time I brought it up, you're going to need more tanks. And someone said, well, we already have tanks. No, you're going to have to put new ones in, get more, because you're going to have more. So there's going to be more hazardous materials in the area. I want to know what's going on our ground. Also, I hear talks of windows, a 2-year project. If this bus depot goes there and there's no air conditioning for the Fort Washington Elementary School, that the windows get open, they're going to breathe this stuff all in. So it's going to fill up. So make my comments. Thank you very much.
Jen Kuznets, Fort Washington. I did want to maybe get a little update on the transportation stuff that's been going on. I know, and I just actually had questions about the late buses at Sandy Run Middle School. I guess I'm curious why there are 2 or 3 buses that are considered the late buses, that are just parked in the parking lot waiting, and students just kind of waiting to be allowed to board them. So they don't leave school until maybe 10, 15 minutes after school's let out. It seems like we have a ton of curb where the buses could pull up and everybody could get on the bus right after school and go home and be on their way. So I'm just curious as to why we have it stacked that way, because the buses are actually there, and then I feel like that would make it all the better for the elementary school run, to get the buses out. And then I guess that's it. I'm interested to hear your updates, because I know, like, my daughter made it with 1 minute to spare before school started. She's, definitely there's a couple buses that are still very late, and I just want to make note. Someone had sent me a message just to kind of add this to the mix, that changing the bus schedule in the middle of a school year, when most parents have their plans for childcare set and their plans, and now buses that are 10 minutes late or 20 minutes early or whatever it is, has really messed up a lot of the parents' situation. So just, I guess, maybe keep that in mind moving forward. I guess that's it. Thank you.
I really had no intention of being here. Pam Olszewski. I was heading to the PTO meeting, but here I am. It's funny because Bob mentioned the water fountains, and I was curious of the same thing because a few months ago I dropped off water for my daughter, and the woman at the middle school told me that all the water fountains had filters. I was like, huh, really? She said, yep, they're all good. So I don't know if that's true or not. Okay, and then, the second was about changing the bus schedule, and I wasn't so much concerned about myself, but my daughter has like crazy anxiety. So the idea, she stressed from the minute that was announced that the buses would change all weekend, all through Thanksgiving. I was like, oh my God, it's okay. She's fine, but she is one of those kids now that has to stand, she's like, I don't know why we're here till 3:10, so every minute counts. So anyway, that was just sort of a follow-up. I was curious the timing of when that was. And also, if the bus is in fact there, why are they not getting on it? So that's all.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close community input. I guess we should turn the heat up for Pam. No, you're
No, but you're
bundled up. You're wearing gloves.
You're dressed very. So.
All right. So.
In the interest of time, because Pam and I both have to get over to the PTO meeting that she reminded me of. We weren't doing sign language. She was actually reminding me, like, aren't you supposed to be over there? The water fountains that are turned on have the filtration on it, and so we'll provide another update. In terms of the buses, the late buses, that concern, the late bus at Sandy Run, that concern was brought to me yesterday. I don't know, Ms. Bray, if you have any information on.
I don't at this time. It's news to me.
Okay, so let's do this then. We will get with Mr. Robbins. I'll send Mr. Robbins an email tonight, figure out why we have the quote-unquote late bus issue.
Steve, is there anything else you feel the need to cover before we let you go?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll get to work on answering other questions. Brenda?
There is just one other a point I could make about transportation. The reason for the change in at Thanksgiving time. A number of the runs at the middle school don't have equitable times. There were 2 of them that were particularly long, the bus routes. And so while we hear from the people that are negatively impacted, we also hear from folks that were happy with the change because their children aren't on the buses quite so long. Thanksgiving was determined to be a decent time rather than waiting until after winter break, which we could have done, but just trying to get it worked out. And also, having folks not have to go all the way across the district from ending their middle school run and going to an elementary school to do their runs. They were late, sometimes getting across. I think we all know that Upper Dublin can be rather congested at certain times of day. So this was just really done to balance loads, balance time, and to perhaps be a little more efficient. I don't know the answer to the questions regarding apparently buses being staged. Is that what I was hearing? Okay. And we'll follow up on that.
There was a comment about road apparent widening, perhaps, at Highland and Fort Washington. Can we say unequivocally that has nothing to do with us? I don't know anything about it.
No, we have not. I have seen surveyors out there, but I don't know if they're for any of the township projects that are proposing down along Fort Washington Avenue with some of the new pedestrian signage and crosswalks. But any time that anybody's proposing any work, somebody does a traffic study. So yes, sir, it's not uncommon to see surveyors up and down the roads, whether or not it's a PennDOT looking at doing something. But no, they have. It's nothing for us.
Right, okay, so perhaps contact the township to find out what that's all about. Are all the water fountains going to get done, or I think, as Steve said, as they get replaced? What is the plan for the rest of the water fountains that are not currently filtered and on?
The water fountains, I can definitely say everything at Sandy Run in the annex has been filtered. Fort Washington Elementary has been filtered. Jarretttown, Thomas Fitzwater are all filtered. Maple Glen, being that they had a different water quality, they have not been done yet. And the high school, we have a list that we have done. Some we're trying to figure out how to do or what we can do with the fountains, but we can come up with this.
Okay, I think that's all I see. Does anyone have anything else? Okay. So our next Operations Committee meeting will be December 20th at 6 p.m. here in this room, and we are adjourned. We'll set up for finance in about 5 minutes.